Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping in for a deep exploration of what happens when massive, intense fan dedication meets the often disappointing reality of creative success. We're zeroing in on a single massive franchise and analyzing the fallout from its finale. And we're not talking about just minor criticism.
No, not at all. This is full-blown cultural events driven by, dissatisfaction and this profound yearning for something more nuanced in our mainstream entertainment.
A yearning for something deeper.
That's precisely right.
Yeah.
The source material you've shared with us provides a magnificent, if sometimes alarming, window into the modern state of audience.
Alarming is a good word for it.
It is. We are looking at a hyper-organized, deeply analytical fandom that is, at the same time, often suffering from what you might call informational indigestion.
I like that. Informational indigestion.
Yeah, the audience is just so well-versed, so engaged, that the narrative they construct internally, the fan theory, is often infinitely more complex and frankly more appealing than the narrative that was actually delivered by the creators.
So our mission today is to unpack that disc.
That's the core of it.
Okay, let's unpack this because the entire deep dive centers on the massive cultural fallout surrounding the finale of one of the biggest Stranger Things. Huge. And our journey today, it's structured around two distinct yet deeply interconnected pillars of audience reaction.
Right.
On one side, we have Conformity Gate. It's a highly organized, almost conspiratorial fan movement centered entirely on the belief that a secret, hidden episode actually existed.
And then on the other side, we have an unsparing, minute-by-minute critique of a specific character moment.
A very specific moment.
A lengthy 7-minute coming-out scene involving the character Will Byers. And this scene, according to one of the critics we examined, belongs on the Mount Rushmore of cringe.
Wow. Okay, so no punches pulled there.
None whatsoever.
And these two pillars, they seem separate, right? One is about a grand plot conspiracy. The other's about a specific character. But they actually represent the same core tension.
They really do.
It's this relentless search for depth and complexity where the audience perceives there isn't any. And then the sharp rejection of content that feels overly simplistic, cliched, or dare we say pandering.
It's the difference between asking, is there a secret story beneath the surface? And asking, why did the surface story feel so flat?
But both questions come from the same place.
Exactly. Both are expressions of profound disappointment.
And to start, we have to recognize the sheer physical, real-world impact of this fan theory. Because the anticipation for this theoretical secret ending, it wasn't just digital chatter confined to forums.
No, it went way beyond that.
It actually crashed the internet.
It's truly a testament to the power of collective digital anticipation and arguably group delusion. It's kind of staggering.
So the initial hook, the moment everyone thought this Phantom episode would drop, was midnight on January 7th.
That was the date. All eyes were on the clock.
And the anticipation was so high, the expectation of a secret Duffer Brothers treat so visceral, that Netflix servers actually crashed across certain regions.
They buckled. The sheer volume of fans logging in simultaneously, all at the same second after midnight, just overloaded the system.
And this isn't just speculation, right? We know this happened.
Oh, no, it's a fact. One of the sources we looked at shared an image of the technical error message that greeted millions of disappointed fans.
The classic, something went wrong.
Something went wrong. We were having trouble with your request. That one. And the ironic tragedy here is that this failure message, instead of crushing the theory,
it did the opposite.
It actually became proof for the most dedicated believers that they were onto something huge.
So the crash wasn't a glitch, it was. It was evidence.
Evidence that Netflix had buckled under the weight of the secret they were trying to hide. It's a perfect encapsulation of how the mind works when it's driven by hope and, intense dedication.
So let's properly define this thing. Conformity Gate. Where does that even come from?
Well, the sources actually admit they don't know the exact origin of the name itself.
Oh, okay.
But the movement itself was concrete. It exploded because a highly specific subset of the Stranger Things diehard fans felt deeply, deeply dissatisfied. They refused to accept the ending they were given.
They just said, nope, that can't be it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They truly believed that the Duffer Brothers had hidden a super secret full extra episode, not a special, not a documentary.
But a continuation of the plot.
A continuation, one designed to drop after the primary broadcast had concluded, as a reward for the real fans.
And what's so critical here is understanding the level of belief. This wasn't a joke, right? This wasn't just some lighthearted hope.
Not at all. It was a deeply held conviction that the true satisfying conclusion had yet to air. And like we said, the movement was powerful enough to literally overload one of the world's largest content distribution networks.
That's some serious devotion.
It is. And the initial timeline and impact around that January 7th date is key, because the failure of the prediction didn't kill the theory.
It just made it stronger.
It birthed a whole new layer of complexity.
And this is where we get into this really strange dichotomy that was present in the source critique, because the commentary, it actually starts by giving massive credit to the creators.
Right, which is kind of surprising.
It is. They acknowledge that to inspire this level of extreme dedication, to connect with people on what they called a very, very visceral level.
A level that drives them to crash servers looking for an episode that doesn't exist.
That is cited as a profoundly positive outcome of quality show creation. You want fans to be this invested in your world and your character. It's the dream, in a way.
There's always a but.
Of course, there's a downside. When that high-stakes prediction fails, what follows isn't acceptance or even just simple sad. It's what the source termed hope. The commentary immediately juxtaposes that sincere dedication with the coping mechanism used when midnight struck on January 7th and nothing happened.
And cope in this context is it's the cognitive mechanism where fans, having invested this enormous intellectual and emotional energy into a theory, they just can't abandon it.
It'd be too painful.
Way too painful. So they have to immediately rationalize the failure of their collective prediction to keep the theory and the hope for that superior ending alive. They were just clinging to the idea that the Duffer Brothers' deception was simply deeper than they'd anticipated.
That sounds like a textbook case of motivated reasoning, doesn't it?
Oh, 100%.
You start with the desired conclusion, the secret episode exists, and then you search only for evidence that affirms it.
And when contradictory evidence appeared, like the servers crashing and no episode appearing,
you just interpret it as a further clue in the large, aha, they're trying to throw us off.
Precisely. They've invested so much in being right that the cost of admitting they were wrong it outweighs the logic of the situation. And this investment is deep. I mean, you have to understand, they spent hours, days, weeks combing through promotional materials, past dialogue, obscure background shots.
You can't just throw that work away because of the calendar date.
You can't. And so here's where it gets really interesting, because the source points out that they didn't just give up.
No, they pivoted.
They pivoted hard. They claimed they had simply misread the signs that the Duffer Brothers had so cleverly provided.
So the signs were always there. They got the interpretation wrong.
Exactly. The meaning or the timing was off, but the core theory was sound. And that shift in interpretation is key. It demonstrates the almost limitless capacity of the human mind to accommodate new, contradictory information without abandoning its core belief structure.
They just had to figure out how to keep playing this 5D chess game.
That's the perfect term for it.
So after the monumental letdown of the 7th, where did they pivot to? What was the new plan?
The new predicted drop date became Monday, January 12th.
Okay, a few days later. And the justification for this shift had to be, what, equally complex?
Of course. It couldn't just be a random date. The January 12th date coincides with the premiere of the behind-the-scenes doc, One Last Adventure, The Making of Stranger Things, Season 5.
And for the Conformity Gate truthers, this scheduling was, of course,
no mere coincidence.
Naturally.
Absolutely not. The reasoning became that the documentary itself is not simply a making-of feature. It's a calculated ruse designed to throw us off the scent.
A decoy.
A massive decoy. The Duffer Brothers, in this elaborate theory, are playing this massive intentional head game with their audience, deliberately creating decoys and misdirections to test the true believers.
The ones who can see past the ruse.
The ones who are smart enough to see the real game.
And the level of evidence cited to support this new pivot, this new date. The source describes it as, frankly, ridiculous.
That's putting it mildly.
We aren't talking about subtle foreshadowing here. Our fans were investigating minutia that would require, like, forensic analysis and a serious, maybe even pathological commitment to finding patterns where they just don't.
This is a perfect example of what we discussed earlier. Pareidolia.
Seeing faces in the clouds?
Exactly. The psychological phenomenon of perceiving significant patterns or connections in random or vague stimuli. When the emotional investment is this high, the brain is primed to interpret noise as signal. The fan community is essentially experiencing a collective form of pattern-seeking overload.
We have to get into the details here because these clues are what bring the theory to life. Give us the specifics on the ridiculous evidence.
Okay, well, those list is extensive, and a lot of it's, subjective. It includes things like barely noticeable color change of a dial in a background scene.
A dial.
A single dial. And this was interpreted as a countdown signal. Then you had people's haircuts and stances in a single promotional shot, which were supposedly meant to resemble the character Henry, signaling his secret return.
Their stances, like how they were stand.
How they were stand. Then there were tiny, blurry things found in the extreme background of a scene. An item on a shelf, for example, that was given immense plot significance.
Wait, I have to stop you there. A blurry background. How can a dedicated fan base, which we agree is intelligent and dedicated, take a barely visible set dressing and assign it significance that overrides the act script?
Because the theory demands when you operate under the premise that the creators are playing 5D chess, nothing can be accidental. Everything, even a blurry item, must be an intentional clue designed to be deciphered.
So the less clear the clue, the more profound it must be.
Exactly. The moment you accept the fundamental premise of a vast cover-up, the rules of evidence shift entirely. The less visible the clue, the more profound its meaning is assumed to be. It's for the real fans to find.
Wow, okay. What else?
And of course, a spare line or two of seemingly innocuous dialogue from previous season that had been ignored, but was now recontextualized as the hidden key to the entire thing.
But the most specific detail, the one that really captures this obsession with numeric pattern, was the focus on dungeons.
Yes, this is a beautiful illustration of pareidolia at work. In a scene, some D&D dice were shown in a particular arrangement on a table.
Just sitting there.
Just sitting there.
Yeah.
And fans meticulously went frame by frame, tallied the numbers visible on the dice, and they added up to 43. 43. And this number was immediately theorized to reference a non-existent 43rd episode of the show.
So the Duffer Brothers hid a coded message in the background using the show's favorite games, pointing to an episode count that doesn't.
That was the theory. But if you think about it analytically, why 43? Why not 42, which is a famous pop culture reference? Why not 50, a nice round number?
Because 43 is what the dice happened to add up.
Exactly. It was a random dice arrangement at that specific moment. But in the absence of an explanation, the brain creates a pattern, and the intensity of the fan commitment fuels the belief that this random number is a secret signal. This kind of repetitive number obsession is a classic hallmark of conspiracy-adjacent theory crap.
And this intense search for hidden meaning, it connects directly to the 5D chess mindset. The source specifically links this to broader conspiracy theory culture.
It does. It specifically suggests the Conformity Gate theorist acts like a QAnon aunt or a QAnon uncle.
Oof.
Yeah. Someone who believes everything, even the simplest delay or scheduling change, is part of a highly complex, deceptive game orchestrated by unseen forces.
The underlying psychology is identical, isn't it?
It really is. It's a deep mistrust of the surface narrative and a belief that you, the individual theorist, possess the superior intellect to decipher the true, hidden meaning that the masses are too blind to see.
The source quotes one fan's theory directly, which it encapsulates this mindset perfect. They're looking at the production updates and they say, notice how they stopped giving us photo, but gave us a video doc with a date of January 12th.
So they see the lack of photos as a clue.
A huge clue. And they go on. The whiteboard showing the plot that didn't happen is relevant. I think it's to throw us off because we caught on too fast.
There it is. The core implication is a narcissistic one.
How so?
The fans believe they are smarter than the creators, and the creators know it. Therefore, the creators must resort to elaborate cover-up, and the very act of the cover-up validates the theories correct. They're trying to hide it, so we must be right.
It's a completely closed loop.
Completely. And they even pull historical evidence from the franchise itself to bolster this idea of misdirection.
What, like other times they've been misled?
Exactly. Another fan claim referenced the Broadway play, Stranger Things, The First Shadow. The play was intentionally advertised as something completely different.
Oh, I remember this. It was supposed to be a smaller, less consequential prequel.
Right. Until the last second, when its true, significant connection to the main plot was revealed. So this led fans to believe that this pattern of radical misdirection is a deliberate, franchise-wide strategy.
If the play was misleading, why couldn't the whole finale be misleading?
It's a self-affirming internal logic. It's impossible to argue against because any evidence you provide against it is just part of the cover-up.
And the tragic conclusion that the commentary arrives at is that this dream theory crafting is driven by a desperate hope for a better end.
Just a desperate hope.
Leading them to seek affirmation for increasingly tenuous connection. The commentary summed it up with a heavy dose of sarcasm.
That was pretty brutal.
They said, January 12th comes after January 7th. Wow, what a discovery. Thank God you're here. We'd never have figured that out.
That sarcasm just highlights the futility of it all. Hope is a killer, as the source puts it. The hope for a superior secret narrative is so strong, it compels them to find meaning in logical triviality.
It demonstrates the powerful urge for the desired narrative to override the reality of the actual narrative.
When the story fails to satisfy, the audience will actively invent a more complex, challenging one for themselves.
Which is a perfect transition, actually. That sets up a fascinating point of dissatisfaction. We've looked at the audience that demands more plot complexity and secret ending. Now let's pivot and look at a segment of the audience that demanded better character.
Right.
And they reacted with extreme hostility to a specific scene they felt was just poorly executed. This moves us from searching for secret episodes to analyzing the Mount Rushmore of cringe.
Will Byers coming out scene.
Disagree.
And this transition is crucial because it shows that fan disappointment isn't monolithic. It's not all one thing.
Right.
It comes in two primary forms: systemic failure, where the plot wasn't deep enough, and execution failure, where a character moment was handled badly. The critique here centers not on the subject matter, but on the perceived heavy-handedness, the pacing, and the delivery.
Okay, so let's detail what the source calls 7-minute prop. The execution of this scene is described as deserving a spot on the Mount Rushmore of cringe because of its sheer excessive length and, critically, its poor placement.
The length is the immediate source of the critic's frustration. The source explicitly states that the scene goes on for 7 minutes. 7.
Which feels like an eternity in a...
An eternity. And to give you some context, the critic compared this drawn-out emotional monologue to concrete, recognizable time markers to really hammer the point home.
And the specific comparisons are what make the critiques so memorable. We need to frame them for our listeners because they illustrate the absurdity.
The critic makes this hilariously specific comparison, that the scene is longer than the iconic rock anthem Bohemian Rhapsody,
Which clocks in around 6 minutes.
Right. And it's also longer than the operation to capture Maduro, which in online circles it's a meme. It's shorthand for anything that is ludicrously, agonizingly drawn out and overdramatized.
So, using those two comparisons, we understand the critique. The scene felt like an eternity, dragging the emotional core to the point of self.
It just went on and on and on. And the timing critique is perhaps even more damaging to the narrative.
Where it happened.
Exactly. This scene takes place near the end of the entire saga, disrupting what the critic calls a moment when there was a threat incoming and years of major unresolved plot threads demanding attention.
So the world is in.
And the show, according to this critique, just slams on the brake for this single protracted emotional moment. Instead of dealing with the immediate crisis or advancing the primary narrative towards resolution, the show pauses everything.
The narrative tension is just gone.
Broken. For what the critic views as an obligatory rather than organic moment.
And the physical execution details, they heighten the cringe factor.
Oh, massively. The entire ensemble cast around 20 people is gathered.
20 people?
Around 20. Creating this dramatic, unnatural setting for what should have been a private or at least a much smaller revelation. And Will is crying, everyone else is crying. The emotion is just ramped up to 11.
And the critic's major grievance about the execution is that Will refuses to just spit it out for the entire 7 minutes.
He's beating around the bush.
Delivering this whole emotional, tear-filled lead-up before finally confessing his sexual identity, which he eventually sums up by saying, "I don't like girls."
And the commentary absolutely mocks this specific line. The critic questions why such a declaration, in the context of a modern, accepting TV show, required 7 minutes of preamble and such a massive, tearful display.
The implication being that not liking girls is hardly a unique or world-ending revelation today that demands that much narrative sacrifice.
Especially when a monster is about to attack the town.
Right. And that leads directly to what the critic called the support bash.
Yes. The source criticizes the scene where one by one, every single character stands up to declare, "I support you and I support you," and so on.
He compares the reaction to the overly dramatic, self-important nature of the "I am Spartacus" trope.
It's the sheer theatricality of the support that bothers the critic. The commentary dismisses the reaction as mind-numbing because it suggests this overwhelming, shocking sequence of support would only have been relevant maybe 15 or 25 years ago on television.
A time when such a revelation might genuinely face widespread rejection.
Precisely. Today, the critics argue, that level of drama surrounding an identity revelation feels manufactured and divorced from the show's own internal reality.
Now, before we go deeper into the identity critique, we have to briefly insert this related source commentary on general. It's a small point, but it underscores the need for...
Right. A separate source provided a strong critique against generalization, comparing a comment made by someone in the video as dumb, and similar to the broad generalization that all men are stupid.
So it's a meta-critique. It's reinforcing the theme running through all of this, which is that the audience is asking for complexity, not platitudes or generalization.
Whether those generalizations come from the creators about social acceptance or from the fan critics about the quality of
And in this specific scene, the generalization is that this moment is inherently revolutionary and dramatically necessary.
Whereas the critics felt it was just cliché, drawn out, and ultimately an overstatement of importance in the context of the larger narrative.
Which brings us to the core social critique presented in the source material. It links the scene's execution to a broader cultural trend.
Right. The argument is that there's an overwhelming obsession in the culture, possibly driven and amplified by social media, to feel different than everyone.
And the source identifies this profound paradox here, that many people claiming or desperately seeking to be unique are, in fact, exactly the same in their efforts, motivations, and the mechanisms they exert their difference.
The host of the commentary video even injected their own perspective on this.
What did they say?
They stated that it's perfectly okay not to be special, and that the desire to stand out should stem from genuine achievement, excelling at things one loves, or through unique action, not simply manufactured identity markers.
So the source material suggests that this overwhelming cultural need for a dramatic announcement or a dramatic moment of difference is symptomatic of a failure to achieve true individuality through merit, skill, or notable personal action.
Which is where we need to tread carefully but fully report the source's argument. This leads to the sharpest critique, what we're calling the personality replacement argument.
Okay.
The source argues that individuals who cannot achieve individuality through their own merit or action use a sexual orientation or perhaps any identity marker as a replacement for a personality.
That is a very harsh viewpoint.
It is undeniably a harsh, almost clinical viewpoint from the critic. And it's crucial that our listeners understand we are impartially reporting on the content provided in the critique. We are not endorsing this generalization. The source is articulating a perspective that sees the writing choice as simplifying a complex human trait into a single performative characteristic.
Right. So the critique isn't a broad social commentary on identity. It's a specific, brutal assessment of the screenwriter. The source views the scene as poorly written because it makes the character's entire internal life, his 7-minute emotional crisis, revolve entirely around a single external.
And the critic concludes that in the context of the show's writing, there's nothing unique about them, there's nothing special about them, yet the character feels the need for a big 7-minute announcement that requires the entire group to gather and react emotionally.
The criticism, therefore, is that the writers treated the identity revelation as inherently dramatic and unique when, in a modern context-appropriate setting, it might have been better served with more subtlety and brevity.
Maybe even as a casual aside, the source suggests that the execution indicates that the writers felt certain characteristics must be presented in media as inherently dramatic and requiring a huge fanfare, even when the rest of the narrative is in crisis.
And to really drive that point home and inject some dark, provocative humor, the source used extreme sarcastic suggestions for future media.
Oh, these were wild.
Inserting the 7-minute coming out scene inappropriately into high-tension situations to show how narrative integrity is sacrificed for this one moment.
The examples are certainly used for illustrative shock value and humor. They're designed to make the listener recoil at the idea of such poor dramatic timing.
So what were they?
Imagine, as the source suggests, this scene being inserted into a horror movie while the killer is approaching.
Yeah.
Or in an emergency film where planes are coming down and the characters must wait to hear about my insatiable thirst for dick.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the meta joke here is especially sharp. The idea that the killer is approaching, but he would never harm you because you are gay, only because he is the killer, but he'd still wait patiently for the 7 minutes to...
The quote was, "The killer might be a bad guy, but he would never harm you. He's going to kill you, but he's not going to kill you because you're gay."
That kind of sarcastic extrapolation just highlights the critics' extreme frustration with what they perceive as forced relevance, overshadowing narrative integrity.
If the scene is so crucial that it overrides a monster attack or an impending disaster, the dramatic weight is clearly misplaced, according to the specific critique.
And we have to acknowledge that this intense, sometimes overly sensitive criticism of character choice, it isn't new in fandom.
No. Not at all. The source references the IT movies, where some fans complained that the villain Pennywise was homophobic because he killed a gay character.
Right.
That historical context is valuable because it shows that audiences have been projecting modern social values and expectations onto fictional characters and even narrative antagonists for quite some time. Demanding that even a horror villain adhere to specific moral codes or hyper-scrutinizing character death based on identity shows that fan dedication and subsequent outrage can reach similar hyperbolic levels across vastly different current franchise.
But the frustration in the Will Byers critique, it focuses less on morality and more on the execution, right? It suggests a shift from demanding moral representation, demanding competent writing.
That's the key distinction. In the IT example, fans demanded a change in the villain's motivation. In the Stranger Things example, the critic demanded a change in the scene's pacing and relevance. Both are seeking narrative satisfaction, but they're coming at it from different angles.
So what does this all mean when we bring the two halves of this deep dive together? We have fans desperately searching for a secret, complicated episode with conformity.
And we have fans harshly rejecting a main character scene for being overly simplistic and drawn out with a Mount Rushmore of cringe.
It's the ultimate synthesis, really.
It is. Both reactions reflect a feeling that the official content lacks depth or complexity. The pursuit of the secret episode and the intense critique of the characters are symptomatic of the same underlying issue.
Which is?
A real hunger amongst audiences for something profound and complicated that they feel current mainstream media often fails to deliver.
And the source argues that this is precisely why fan theories are often 1,000 times more interesting than just the basic stuff that's being regurgitated in the actual show.
And this phenomenon is common, particularly in the massive lore-heavy superhero genre. You see diehard comic fans creating these intricate theoretical narratives that far surpass the final executed plot points delivered by the studios.
Because fan theories are often unencumbered by the major, messy creative obstacles that face the action.
Exactly. The complexity they envision is structurally, financially, and logistically impossible in the real world of art as commerce. The fans have unlimited creative freedom, the creators.
So let's introduce that key real-world constraint that the source highlights, the commerce barrier.
This is so important to understand.
The creative team operates with a set of guardrails that fans do not have to worry about. Fans can imagine the perfect crossover or the most intricate multi-season plot twist that requires 5 major A-list actors here.
But the people making the show are limited by cold, hard reality, and those guardrails are numerous. They include basic constraints, like budget limitation. Can we afford the visual effects, the massive set pieces, the location shooting that this theory requires?
And also the sheer difficulty of scheduling.
Scheduling is a massive component we often forget about when we theorize. Fans don't have to worry about securing the right actor, especially if that actor is now a major star with commitments to 6 other projects that were scheduled 3 years ago.
So if your theory requires a crucial character to appear for 6 weeks of filming, and that actor is only available,
the theory is dead before it starts. It's just novel.
Absolutely. And then you have the really complex hurdles, which are the intellectual property guardrails and licensing restrictions.
Oh yeah, the legal stuff.
Yeah.
The source uses the example of Marvel, noting that even they, the biggest studio in the world, do not own all their characters outright.
Right. The specific classic example cited is that Marvel under Disney does not own the film rights to Spider. Sony does.
So while fans can theorize endlessly about the perfect Spider-Man integration into an existing plot, the creative team has to navigate complex corporate legal boundaries and multi-studio negotiations just to get the character into a single.
That's a guardrail fans never, ever encounter in their purely imagined.
The Duffer Brothers, or any major showrunners, are operating a billion-dollar business. Their complexity is logistical and financial, whereas the fans' complexity is purely narrative. That is the fundamental difference that leads to this gap in satisfaction.
And the source speculates that the creative teams themselves are likely annoyed by these hyper-intricate theories.
Annoyed and probably a little jealous.
Because they wish they could create that level of complexity. They yearn for a world with no guardrails where every idea I put on the table is something that we could do.
But the reality is that the real world, when your art is also a form of commerce, doesn't work that way. It's just not that simple to produce a 43rd episode with the clues hidden in D&D dice and also coordinate the schedules of 20 major actors.
Which is a profound final point on this search for profundity. Whether audiences are looking for D&D dice clues that add up to 43 or demanding better-paced character revelation.
They are universally seeking content that respects their intelligence and dedication by being complex and nuanced.
And when the product fails to deliver, the audience fills the gap.
Either with sharp projection of the writing or with elaborate fantasy theory that they invent themselves. It's the audience saying, we know this world deeply, and we believe it deserves a better, more thoughtful story than the one you gave.
And that intensity of engagement is simultaneously a positive signal for show creators. You have a massive captive audience, but it's also a
destructive force when it devolves into a desperate attempt to prove that a disappointing ending was actually just a clever, deep misdirection. The audience is showing up, they are engaged, but they're also bringing narrative expectations that are often simply unattainable within the constraints of commercial filmmaking.
It's a true double-edged sword that defines modern fandom.
It really is.
That wraps up our deep dive into the fascinating and frankly frustrating world of intense fandoms surrounding major franchise. We covered the January 7th Netflix server crash, bizarre clues and pareidolia of Conformity Gate,
the harsh critique of screenwriting that, in the source's view, substitutes identity for personality, and the structural limitations of creating artist commerce.
It all points to a massive systemic disconnect between audience desire and industry capacity.
And the key insight we have to reiterate is that the intensity of this audience engagement is a reflection of genuine love for the property. It shows that the creators connected on that visceral level. But that depth of commitment can lead to these complex cope mechanisms and QAnon style theory crafting. When the finished product doesn't match the internal narrative fans have spent years building, the audience's own creative energy becomes a competitor to the studio's product.
So, we leave you with this provocative thought. We've spent this time analyzing how audiences demand a depth complexity that studios often can't or won't deliver due to the commercial guardrail, the schedules, the budgets, the IP negotiations.
The real world stuff.
The real world stuff. If fan theories are consistently more intricate, and frankly, more interesting than the actual content produced by the studio, what does that say about the role of the audience storytelling?
That's a great question.
And are we entering an age where the meta-narrative created by the fan, the collective, collaborative construction of a secret episode or a profound character arc, is actually more creatively powerful and complex than the original source text?
Something to mull over until the next one. The story is perhaps less about what the creators made and more about what the audience wished they had.